Our next speaker, over the past several years, our next speaker has been busy on a range of cutting-edge new media projects at the LongNow Foundation, debating the future of technology and culture at Wheaton College and serving as online communications coordinator at Interfaith Youth Corps. Taking some time off to share his thoughts on us today is Bryan Campen on how to think for the next millennium.
To follow, a tough talk to follow, but a really appropriate one. Thank you, Douglas. My name is Bryan Campen. I work on new media projects at the LongNow Foundation. And really what I'm going to do today is just introduce you to the world's slowest supercomputer and discuss with you a few ideas for simply thinking long term. Just playing off of Doug's talk, I'd like to argue to you that though we know the world is round now, when we think of time, in modern culture, most of us see the world as flat. We're not at the point where we should be. We're not thinking long term. So really what I'm giving you today is just a small starter kit to start thinking long term. There are a lot of ideas we had discussed about long term thinking and what should I discuss, and I sent a bunch of ideas in, and we really just narrowed it down to this. I'm going to give you some of the projects and some of the things that inspire us and leave you with that. So this is the clock of the LongNow Foundation. Our central project is a 10,000-year clock, and the idea is that with 10,000 years having come already in human history since the last ice age, we're sort of standing in the middle of human history, and this 10,000-year clock is going to be with us for the next 10,000 years. But to give you a sense of long-term thinking that's a little bit more personal, I think this is a beautiful icon, and it really does help people reorient their sense of time and how we think of time. I just wanted to give you a more personal anecdote that I think is just brilliant from Danny Hillis, who's building the clock of the LongNow. These are the oak beams at the New College at Oxford. The New College is called the New College because it was built in 1385. And these oak beams rotted out about 500 years after it was built. So naturally, the college, you mind if I sit? The college came to the groundskeeper and said, how are we going to replace this? Because in the process of 500 years passing, the oak beams have become very expensive. So the groundskeeper said to them, well, that's fine. 500 years ago, there was a grove of oak trees planted for this very purpose. So what's so wonderful about that is that it's very hard to think of deep time. It's very hard to think of anything beyond, let's say, our grandchildren when we're talking in personal terms. But there's something, at least for me, very moving about that story, that someone would consider another person they don't even know over that long a period of time. So let me give you a couple of quotes from the founders of the LongNow Foundation. This is Stewart Brand, who also founded the Whole Earth Catalog and has done a ton of really interesting projects. And it's so appropriate for the TEDx talks today. Civilization is revving itself into a pathologically short attention span. I'll just read it out. This trend might be coming from acceleration of technology. It could be the short horizon perspective of market-driven economics. The next election perspective of democracies, as Robert said, get it done in 4 years, is often a cry from the political offices of this country. And then, or it could be just simply the distractions of multitasking. But whatever it is, it's happening, and it's happening to all of us, and it's, at this point, sort of all pervasive. In the process of coming up with that quote, Stewart Brand, Brian Eno, who's also on the board of LongNow and is a musician and an artist, and Alexander Rose, the executive director, sat down and came up with this. It's called speed layers. And these are sort of the layers that we can live in on this planet, in the way that we experience time. If time is the medium we live in, then these are the ways that we experience time. But for most of us, we live on those top 3 layers. Fashion and art, and you could include some kinds of finance at this point, move super fast, right? Commerce, infrastructure. We sort of go to governance, culture, and nature, but really everything is moving upwards. So part of what the LongNow Foundation is trying to do, what we're trying to do here, is offer you something that moves you into deeper, thinking about deeper time. So this is another quote from Stewart Brand. Some sort of balancing corrective to short-sightedness is needed. Some mechanism or myth which encourages the long view and the taking of long-term responsibility, where long-term is measured at least in centuries. This photograph of the whole Earth I put up just simply because Stewart Brand, the president of LongNow, was also the first person to really publicly request photographs from NASA for photographs of the whole Earth. And he felt that with the environmental movement, what this photo helped do was reorient people's sense of responsibility to something larger than their community or their country, but to the entire planet, and looking at our planet as something for which we're all responsible. So we really felt that symbolically this helped launch the environmental movement. With the Clock of the Long Now, really what we're trying to do is symbolically launch a movement that helps people reconsider time. This is Danny Hillis, builder of some of the world's fastest supercomputers, and also the builder of the Clock of the Long Now, or designer of it. When I was a child, people used to talk about what would happen by the year 2000. And for the next 30 years, they kept talking about what would happen by the year 2000. And now no one mentions a future date at all. The future has been shrinking by 1 year per year for my entire life. And I think it is time for us to start a long-term project that gets people thinking past the mental barrier of an ever-shortening future. So let me give you a little bit more about the clock. So this is what Danny Hill has proposed. I would like to propose a large, think Stonehenge, mechanical clock. And sort of tongue-in-cheek, he said, and you can't read it here, but I'll read it for you. It ticks once a year, bongs once a century, and the cuckoo comes out every millennium. Right? So, let's see here. The problem, of course, is if you're going to have a 10,000-year clock, one, you can't totally guarantee that it's going to exist for the time you'd hope it would exist. I mean, I think some things exist for 2,000 years so far that we have, but most man-made artifacts don't even exist that long. Not even close. I'm stuck here. So in the process of trying to figure out where to store this clock, we looked at a bunch of different structures. We look at the pyramids of Giza. Those are really, sad artifacts compared to what they originally were. Stonehenge, the same thing. But what we were fortunate enough to find was a mountain on the eastern edge of Nevada at Great Basin National Park. There's a 2-mile strip of private land, which eventually was purchased to house the clock, the 10,000-year clock, and an all-languages library. So that project is ongoing right now. It's Mount Washington in eastern Nevada. And just one of the charming things that's on this site is bristlecone pine, which is one of the oldest living things on this planet. So this one's about 4,000 years old, so you have sort of natural clocks of the long now sitting on top of the mountain. And in the process of this, we're also working on a project called the Rosetta Project, which of course takes its name from the Rosetta Stone. What you have up there are Egyptian hieroglyphics that no one knew, and then Egyptian cursive, and then below that ancient Greek. And as you probably know, the Rosetta Stone is famous because when it was discovered in 1799, it allowed us to unlock Egyptian hieroglyphics, which no one had known of, which no one had been able to decode at the time. So the Rosetta Project is really an all-languages library which any future civilization could uncode if they're able to know one language. So here you have the disk. These are the first lines from Genesis 1 because that's the most common thing in human languages that you can find in the most languages. So it's literally in the beginning. In the beginning was God made the heavens and the earth. Languages of the world. If you look up here, there are 1,500 human languages on the back of this disk. And let me just show you this. It sort of points to some other discussions about digital durability that are being discussed here today. But what we have is 1,500 human languages assembled in 2008, 13,000 pages of documentation on the back of this disk. And what we did was we had it micro-etched on nickel, because it was the longest lasting material we could find, micro-etched on nickel, and those are the actual pages. So if you have a 600 power microscope, let's say 1,000 years from now, you're able to read all of these pages on the back. They're actually analog etched in 3D into the back of this disk. Well, why does that matter? I mean, why create an all-languages library? What is possibly going on now that would raise any concern? Well, here's just one example. This was in the Wall Street Journal. We have 6,912 languages on Earth. Only 80 languages can be used on a handset. Now, if there are 4 billion mobile phones on the planet, there are more phones than users, and it's by far the greatest species of technology we have out there, and only 80 languages actually exist on these phones, what do you think is going to happen to language in the next century? Most of those languages are probably going to disappear unless something is done. So there are some really interesting projects underway that, so this is a huge problem, and accelerating technology is raising a lot of these problems. Let me give you a few things that inspire us that are not necessarily related to us, but are really amazing projects. So we have all the languages of human life on Earth being stored in an all-languages library. These are all the plant languages on Earth, all the languages of life on Earth being stored in the Svalbard seed vault in northern Norway. This is about 800 miles from the North Pole. There are, again, 500,000 seeds being stored in this vault. And the idea is to sort of have a backup drive of everything on Earth for several different reasons, from corporate terminator seeds to simply anything that could happen in the next century, from global warming to anything else. So this is Ise Shrine in Japan. This was built about 2,000 years ago. And what's happening here is this shrine is rebuilt every 20 years. That's happened 61 times so far. And it's just a really beautiful, really beautiful image to me. So what happens is every 20 years, a master teaches a student. The student rebuilds the shrine, teaches another person to rebuild it, and on it goes. So for 1,000 years at least, this has been happening. And just one other story. This is from the executive director of the LongNow Foundation, Alexander Rose. He was given a tour of the library at the Vatican. And as they were passing some of the mosaics, he asked there were a series of drawers next to one of the mosaics, and he asked what those were. And so they stopped and showed him. They pulled out these drawers, and there were repeat tiles. There were back-ordered tiles of every single piece of the mosaic so that this could be replaced. So as far as forethought goes, this was maybe 300-400 years ago. They had enough foresight to commission all of these pieces several hundred years ago. So in the end, working on new media, I thought I'd just bring up something very fast and rapid, that a comment that happens across every network I work on online. Something vaguely ironic about us being in all these technological communities. I work in virtual worlds. I work in Facebook, Second Life, Twitter. So what I love about this is that there should be a contradiction. I mean, the fact is that thinking long term is not yet automatic and common. It's difficult and it's rare, as Stewart Brand would say. So there should be a contradiction for everyone when they see us in these different spaces. But one of the great things I do love about being in these technological communities is, for instance, one of the projects that we're working on now is just coordinating with a global series of meetups. And this is the charm of TEDx, right? Is that we're now in a culture where we can address some of the very problems that technology may be a part of by other technology. So this is our global membership and our LongNow community page. And what we're working on now is I'm building literally a starter kit for different meetups so that we can communicate all over the globe and address different long-term problems that different communities are facing, or just get together. So I thought I'd just show you that real quick. And again, you can visit us anytime. And I just thank you for your time.